Hello, and welcome to Mary Spring Nature Center's Tuesday Talks. I'm John Fromer, your host and the program director. Today's talk is generously sponsored by Camden River House, Camden National Bank, and Rennie's Maine Adventure. Mary Spring is open every day of the year, dawn to dusk, free of charge. And you can visit Mary Spring online anytime at maryspring.org on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Mary Spring's mission is to practice, teach, and advocate sound principles of ecology, conservation, and horticulture in order to protect our natural environment and to provide natural landscapes and cultivated areas for public enjoyment. There are many benefits to being a member of Mary Spring Nature Center, including free admission to our spring, summer, and winter lecture series, 10% discount on most purchases, a share of the stewardship, and reciprocating privileges to more than 345 gardens nationwide. Mary Spring is a 501c3 nonprofit organization primarily funded through memberships, grants, and donations. You can donate securely online at maryspring.org. You can give us a call with your credit card at 207-236-2239 or mail your check made out to Mary Spring Nature Center and send it to P.O. Box 893, Camden, Maine 04843, and we thank you. This program was previously recorded on Tuesday, April 29th, 2025, entitled Kitchen Gardens, History and Design, presented by John Fromer of Mary Spring Nature Center. Previously recorded Tuesday talks uploaded to Mary Spring's YouTube channel are generously sponsored by the Cascade Foundation. Kitchen gardens go back thousands of years. Here in Maine, and the Maine hardiness zone map would have changed from a couple thousand years ago to today, I'm sure. And that's the most important thing to look at, because if you've got perennial herbs, for example, you need to know that they'll survive zone 5. If you're using raised beds, your soil will warm up and dry out sooner in the spring, and that can be very helpful. But if you're growing in the ground, that can be a little bit different. So something to think about. Most vegetables, I think, are annuals as far as we grow them, but some vegetables are perennial or biennials. For example, carrots go to seed in the second year. So ancient Greece and through Victorian times is what we're going to talk about. And so picture yourself 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece, and there were certainly different classes, economic classes of people, and what you're going to see is how the different classes were able to get by. All of the images were created by an AI, and I asked it to do certain constraints. But people had walled gardens to keep animals out and also people from stealing, because not everybody necessarily had a beautiful kitchen garden. And so your economic status had a lot to do with what you were able to eat and how far away your food might have come from, primarily if we're talking about fish or game. So you'll see that 70 to 80% of the vegetables were, or food diet was in vegetables, and they were eating things like legumes and grains that had protein, and fruit for vitamins and things like that. The meat and seafood was really reserved for very special celebrations and not common. I guess unless you lived right on the ocean, and then you might be able to fish on a regular basis. They had cucumbers and leeks and garlic, and they had lettuce, and that would be cause lettuce would be good. Crescent arugula would have nice vitamins, and cabbage would have certain benefits. Roughage, I guess you'd say. They had radishes. They loved radishes, and turnips and carrots. I'm going to guess that the carrots that they had back then were probably purple and not orange, but that's a guess. They were purple right up through the 1800s for the most part. And they liked asparagus and cardoons, celery, fennel, garlic to flavor, and leeks. You could imagine that some of their meat may not have been the quality that we recognize today. And so using heavy amounts of spices would be useful in case any of it was not as fresh as it possibly could be. They loved oregano. It was known as the joy of the mountain. And oregano has medicinal properties as well if you have the medicinal variety. Lemon balm would be wonderful as well. And thyme would be common, of course, with the Romans, and parsley is very good for digestion. So they would recognize these things and grow them as best as possible in a Mediterranean climate, which would be hot and dry. Now, the people that had the nobility and wealth, they were able to have beef and pork and game meats, and have people go and hunt for them or otherwise purchase things in the market. And their fish you'd have to be closer to the ocean for fresh fish and things, but they had the wherewithal to go ahead and get exotic fruits like pomegranates and figs. Trade was more by ocean than it was by land, although certainly within Greece it was by overland, and then you'd have things like the silk trade opening up for exotic spices. The middle class, well, they had pork and poultry. It'd probably be pretty common to have a pig and chickens, and the fish would have been something that they would have been able to get, but other types of exotics not as popular or not as available based on economic considerations. And they ate brown bread from whole grains. And you'll find that as we go through this, the wealthy switched to white bread, and the middle and lower classes stayed with brown bread. Of course, now we're eating whole grain bread again. So the lower class, they didn't do so well. And pretty much their entire diet was centered around vegetables and grains, again for protein and vitamins and carbohydrates as well. Beans are, especially dry beans, have a lot of protein in them, and there are a number of peas that would have been available back then. If they were able to find apples and pears, that would have been great. That would have required leaving wherever they were, and they had to have the time to do that. Many of them were probably indentured servants, and so they didn't have a lot of free time, let's put it that way. Meat was rarely consumed, and if they were able to get it, it was probably not the greatest meat that other classes were able to afford. Ancient Rome is similar in the time to the Greek diet, and of course the Romans absolutely loved everything the Greeks did, to the point where they went over and sacked Greece, and they brought back the sculptors and the gardeners and the garden designers, and they treated the gardeners and the garden designers very, very well. They loved everything that the Greeks did. But they did bring back a lot of slaves to work in the gardens and things like that. But they wanted the sculptors to continue with the art, but they loved the way the Greeks did gardening. So it was similar to the Greek diet, lettuce and spinach. They would have dandelion greens, similar carrots and turnips and radishes. Again, it's a Mediterranean climate. They might be near the river, so they could irrigate their fields or be on the ocean, and they would have access to seafood. Slightly different legumes, lentils and chickpeas, fava beans, for example, slightly different. And mushrooms in addition to the cucumbers and artichokes and asparagus. This is a list of herbs that the Romans would use, and similar garlic, again, health benefits of alliums, but also to flavor dishes that might really need it. And they use dill and basil for flavoring, oregano, again, for health benefits, and they used mint. And I imagine they would drink mint tea. So how do we know what the Romans ate and what their gardens looked like? Well, their gardens, again, were walled in, and they were attached right to the house. You would walk out a door from one of the rooms on the house right into the garden, and they had frescoes painted on the walls. Now, of course, this would be the upper class, and the frescoes were incredibly detailed. And sometimes the frescoes were inside because in winter the gardens weren't particularly lively, but even though it's a Mediterranean climate, but the frescoes were so good that they're able to identify birds and also various plants that were painted into these frescoes. So they really knew quite a bit, and a lot of these are coming from Pompeii, of course, such as this one. And the Romans loved water features in their gardens. And if they, with respect to kitchen gardens, it would be mostly fountains and bird baths and things like that. In the larger gardens of somebody who might be an emperor, that was multiple acres of gardens. And they would have ponds large enough, lakes essentially, large enough to have mock naval battles with ships and things. So fast forward a little bit to medieval times and looking at monastic gardens. The gardens were a little bit bigger. There were more monks, not just a family garden. And they were at castles and monasteries. And they were very specifically designed and thought about, and they contained medicinal herbs and vegetables and fruit. And so, again, 70–80% of the diet was going to be vegetable-based, and 20 to 30% would have been meat products, and that might have been chickens and eggs, and they might have had pigs, but not inside of the probably not inside of the monastery gardens, but in a relatively close area. Spinach and cabbage, kale shows up, and leeks, carrots, parsnips, turnips just kept on going through the thousands of years. Probably wider variety of beans and peas and lentils. And then they're now consuming shallots in addition to onions and garlic. Still artichokes, cucumbers, and mushrooms. So they knew what previous people had eaten, and that just continued forward. You can actually get a 1,500-year-old caveman bean, which was in a clay jar that was sealed, and they got it to germinate and save the seeds, and you can buy a bean seed that goes back 1,500 years. They were looking for a pygmy elephant in Arizona. Neil Lash tells the story so well. And so herbs have expanded. Now we have lavender and borage and angelica, in addition to some of the other herbs that we've seen previously. Helpful in the thyme and rosemary and mint and sage can be perennial so that you don't have to grow them from seed every year. Same with lavender. Other herbs would angelica, I believe, is a perennial as well. And by the way, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. I should have mentioned that. Some I'll be able to answer, some I won't. How did the wealthy and the nobility do? Well, they did okay. So beef, pork, poultry, and they would have a wider variety of shellfish than before because there were more trade routes that were available, and people would have been drying fish and transporting it. More fruit coming from other parts of the world. So this is Europe mostly, but there was definitely trade routes into Eastern Europe and across the Middle East. And they were now getting cinnamon and nutmeg and cloves from the silk trade. And so word would spread, and they would be able to transport things further without having the items go bad. So now we're eating white bread from refined flour for the upper class. Renaissance period. So it was prominent in rural and urban areas to have kitchen gardens. There were new plants coming from the Americas that had been discovered, new fruits, new vegetables, new herbs. They were dramatically improving their skill at gardening, which would lead to greater success and a larger bounty. And the gardens took on a greater aesthetic property because of the Renaissance. Now, this would be looking at middle and upper class. The peasants would be doing the best that they could just to get by. But there were now new cooking methods in addition to gardening techniques, which meant that you would likely have more food and could have larger families. And if you were in farming, you were then able to bring more to market. They were doing different things with the meat, and they were getting wild game. Here we're now talking about venison and wild pigs and pheasant being popular. Fish and seafood would have been able to transport it even further. And we're starting to get more exotic fruits, peaches and melons, citrus from the Americas, and potentially South America. But asparagus, artichokes, and spinach are still just as popular. And again, larger trade leads to larger varieties of herbs that would be available. The middle class, they were doing better and similar to nobility, but maybe not quite as much, again, due to the cost, especially if any of the spices were transported over much longer distance. Meat wasn't as frequent, and pork and poultry would have been available. Of course, poultry reproduces very quickly, so that's handy. And fish became a larger part of the diet, fish on Fridays, for example. And again, a greater variety of fruits and brown bread still for the middle class and the lower class, peasants and laborers. Again, the lower class was smaller space to grow what they needed. And so they had to do a lot of companion planting and succession planting to be able to feed their families. Stock vegetables, cabbage and onions would store, beans and lentils, high in protein. Now they're eating rye bread or barley. The beans and peas, again, high in protein. That would certainly be everything that they would need. Easy to produce, easy to save the seed, and trade. Trade in seed would have been very important for the lower classes as well. Fruits, especially if you can dry them, would help get you through the winters. And again, not much meat, but pork, or if they were able to get out and hunt a bird or some other type of a creature, they would not have necessarily had a lot of tools to go out and hunt, such as the other classes might have had. So now we're moving into Victorian times, and we're traditional vegetables, many of which we would certainly have today. Again, greater trade, the ability to transport vegetables and fruits from a further distance faster would have been better. Roads in better condition, the ability to just simply to transport things by boat at a faster speed would have been very important. They likely would have been able to collect ice off of lakes in the winter and store it in straw or sawdust to give them some element of refrigeration for some period of time, and be able to store vegetables in shavings in some wooden boxes over the winter might have also been useful for them as well. It was probably the height of the kitchen gardens, and they started to add in crop rotation, which is where you would take, and I'm going to get to this in greater detail, but you're moving what you're growing around to make sure that your soil is not depleted by particular types of plants, and also moving your crops so that insects which are in the ground are not building up with the same plant put in the same place year after year. More in companion planting, more flowers brought into the garden, and then they're starting to use greenhouses and cloches and cold frames to extend their seasons. They loved natural landscapes, but they're still focused on fruit production, even though they're adding in design. And so here the upper class is eating white bread, and the middle class is eating brown bread, and the lower class is brown bread from rye and barley. So again, it's sort of the same type of thing. Pretty wide variety of herbs, starting to add in calendula as an edible flower. And of course, you can eat the foliage as well. They're using mint and chamomile. So colonial kitchen gardens, they were very important. I don't think that they were as focused on, let's say, the Renaissance type of gardens, which were really extremely attractive. I think in colonial times, it was a new land, and they were really focused on food production more than, let's say, aesthetics. Once I think things got established and time went on, they were able to build in aesthetics, but of course you would want to have flowers where possible. It brings in pollinators, which is good for your gardens as well. Pioneer gardens Were they on the move? Did they have time to maybe stay in a place for a year or two before they moved on, or a short period of time? And a lot of families would stop and say that they had gone far enough and they were happy where they were, and then many kept on going. You would be in a wilderness kind of an area, and so there'd be a lot of animals that would like to eat your gardens, get some of that lettuce. So you need to have some fencing, and you have to have time to do all of that. And then 20th century gardens, French garden, again, very formal, certainly food production, but there were, you go to the store if that's within your wherewithal. But they still like to have access to very fresh vegetables and their own herbs. I think it does make a significant difference to be able to go right out to the garden. And it certainly saves money if you have the time and ability to do that. Victory gardens, World War II, extremely popular. Everybody had a victory garden. They were doing all kinds of different things. And it was very popular. And it kind of faded after World War II. And I think it kind of came back during COVID. But gardening has always been of interest. But you have to have the space, and you have to have the land, and you have to have the knowledge to be able to do that. And I think as the time wore on and people were able to go to a store or to a market, that knowledge wasn't as pervasive as it had been in medieval or Renaissance times, or certainly ancient times, when everybody had to grow most of their own food or go out and catch it one way or another. But the victory gardens were extremely popular, and I think that brought a lot of the knowledge back. In Appleton, at our little farm, this is an example of our one of our growing areas. And so we have sunflowers down here for the birds, and squashes, and beans and legumes, and dry corn, brassicas through here, and tomatoes and peppers. Down in the first area are onions and flowers, carrots, and beets, and other herbs. So a few examples. This is one of our herb gardens from probably 20 years ago, and things are planted in rows, and these were all culinary herbs, and we used straw for mulching around the herbs to keep the weeds down and the moisture in. And these are all predominantly perennial herbs, except for the basil down here. There's a bag of dog hair in a bait bag to keep the deer away. Another example of our kitchen garden that we had, and even though we had an acre of vegetables, we still had a kitchen garden to make sure we remembered what it was like to have a kitchen garden. A lot of fun, and we surrounded it with nasturtiums, and there's various alliums, and chard, basil, and lettuces that would be shaded by this little larch right here, and a water feature. My friend David in Long Island has raised beds on his patio. It's an example of square foot gardening. And so you can find a chart that shows you how many spinach plants you can put in 1 square foot, or if it's 1 tomato, for example. And here at Mary Spring, we have raised beds for Coastal Opportunities. Those folks come over and plant the beds and maintain them. Some of the onions have actually perennialized and have gone to seed. It's pretty cool. And this is an aerial shot of the Camden Rockport Historical Society's kitchen garden, and recommend visiting that as well. And then this was an ornamental herb garden. I think you'll remember I did a talk on ornamental herb garden design. And this was not something that was used for consumption. It was simply something to look at, which was how they did the gardens at the chateaus in France, for example. And it's basil and nasturtiums and marigolds. So design a kitchen gardens. You don't need an acre. That's a lot of space to grow in. It's not the full acre that we used to have, but it's quite a bit of space, and you can grow an awful lot of vegetables if you use certain methods, such as crop rotation and, for example, the black plastic here, which warms the soil. The peppers love that, keeps the weeding down to virtually nothing, and also holds moisture in the soil. The 1 millimeter thick black plastic is the organic standard. Before you start, I think the most important thing is, what will your family eat? And I know people that grew beans, and they thought it was wonderful, and the rest of the family didn't like beans, and they had nothing to do with them. They almost had to just throw them out. So find out what people will eat first, and then grow that if you can. How's your soil? This is a bank over on Islesboro. I'm standing on the shore following those storms we had in 23. And you can see that there is not a lot of topsoil here. There's an inch. And then pretty soon you get into a lot of rocks, and then down here is deadpan clay, and nothing is going to grow in that. So you either have to augment that soil, or bring in new soil, or go with raised beds. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is more aspects of raised beds. And phi, which is the ratio of 1 to 1.6, it goes back thousands of years. It's very pleasing to the human eye. And so one side might be 10 feet and another side might be 16 feet. And that would keep within that ratio. It could be 100 and 1,600 feet, depending. So as I mentioned in the square foot design, you could get this chart from the Bonnie Gardener, Bonnie, and it will tell you how many plants you can plant in 1 square foot. So if you're doing a 10 by 16 foot garden, you're going to want to have as much production as you can if you're trying to really eat out of the garden. And so you might plant things very closely together, such as this lettuce. You might plant in some flowers, or something like runner beans, that is a bean but also a flower, and you can eat the flower. You might decide to have multiple crops in the same season. So the lettuce goes by after 3 cuttings, you need to replant, or you put in early peas and you follow that up with something else, perhaps lettuce, or perhaps something like a fall crop of cabbage. And again, you're going to rotate the crops from one area to another. So here you might have legumes, which would be beans and peas, and then another box with brassicas, and then tomatoes and peppers, onions, and beets or carrots, maybe some flowers and some herbs, and then one area that is used as a cover crop to replenish the soil for a year. And so basically what you'd be looking at is the legumes would go to the brassicas, brassicas to tomatoes, tomatoes to the alliums here, alliums would go to the herbs, and then you've got this cover crop. So the flowers and the vegetables would go to the cover crop, and the cover crop would go back to where your legumes were. And that can help build up your soil. So here's a blank design, and I wanted to walk you through how I designed the herb garden. Pardon me. And what I was thinking about, and hopefully it'll make sense. So we're going to put in a couple of paths, and I've got a fence around it, and at the top I've got a narrow stretch of peas at this point. And you might find that as we go through this, things are added and changed, moved around. Let's put in some tomatoes over here. We're going to use the fence. We're going to tie the tomatoes to that fence instead of using hoops. And this is a 1 foot wide planting area, and this is a 1 foot wide planting area with a 2 foot wide path. And then I've got 4 feet down the middle and a couple of feet back here. So at this point, I thought, well, wouldn't it be pretty to have the back of the garden in nasturtiums? And you can eat the leaves of nasturtiums, and you can eat the flowers of nasturtiums. The smaller the leaves, the better they taste. The big leaves can be maybe chewy. So going down the middle, perennial herbs would be nice to have, and those would be things like thyme and oregano, chives, other perennial herbs that you might want. You certainly put in medicinals if you wanted to there. And but you might want annual herbs, dill or basil or things like that. And here's an area that we're going to plant all season long. And so maybe in the spring, you might start off with pea tendrils. They're very popular now and easy to grow. And so that would be 1 foot length down the row here. And you might follow that up with something else for the summer, early in the year, lettuce or spinach or radishes. And then later in the summer, you might put in maybe some carrots that don't take very long to mature, or maybe they're baby carrots or something along those lines. But the idea is this section is going to change as the summer goes along. Little row of bush beans. If you grow haricot vert bush beans, and this would be a 1 foot wide stretch of bush beans, 4 feet long, and the 4 feet is so that you can reach in from each side of the path 2 feet. That's about the right width for a bed. Haricot vert bush beans, if you had 4 feet of them and picked them regularly, you would have more little French fillet beans than you could eat, I think. Put some brassicas in. Now, in a 4 foot area, that's going to be maybe a couple of cabbage. However, if you wanted to do kale, for example, you could have 4 or 5 or possibly 6, might be pushing it, kale plants, and some of them can get quite tall. There's one called walking stick kale, and the leaves are a couple feet long, and that would provide quite a bit of vegetable matter. You might want to chop that, but you could also have kale being tall, and kohlrabi, also in the brassica family, being quite short and growing under there. You could companion plant lettuce under the brassicas for a little bit of shade as well. Here's a row of carrots with a 1 foot wide row of carrots. You could have 3 rows in that space. So that would give you 12 feet of carrots. Added in a couple feet of onions. And so you could grow shallots or leeks and or onions in that space, maybe 6 inches apart for some of the larger onions, and but the garlic would fit in there nicely, especially as a fall crop for garlic. And flowers are nice in a kitchen garden, certainly. Not it's up to you whether you wanted to do that. And so then the whole thing, except for the perennial herbs, is going to rotate around. So the annual herbs are going to go back into where the succession and the beans are, and the beans and the succession are going to go to the right, and the brassicas and the carrots, etc., will move to the right, and the flowers will end up here in your second year. And you could decide that you don't want to grow something 1 year, and that's fine. And I don't really have a cover crop in this design because it's really pretty small. And you wouldn't want to necessarily give up that space. I think you could augment the space with compost or something to help grow the soil. But this gives you kind of the idea of what the progression of the plantings would be, and then you might swap the peas with the tomatoes in a year. And then I was thinking about it a little further, and I thought, well, that's an awful lot of peas. 16 feet of peas might be a little bit much, but thinking vertically, you might have climbing cucumbers or pole beans that you would, again, affix to the fence, or you could put pole beans right in there, and they might spill out into the walking path, which is okay, provided that you can still get around. And I changed up the far end here, maybe not as many nasturtiums, but let's put in some peppers and eggplant. And the peppers and eggplant, you would not want to rotate into the tomatoes because they're all in the same family, but you might rotate them into following the carrots or the onions. You don't want them really following the beans because the beans as a legume are going to add nitrogen into the soil, and what you'll end up with is great big pepper plants, but not a lot of peppers in there. You'll need to have some structure, and so these are raised beds. They don't have to be. They could be in wood. You could use in-ground beds. You could have wood lining the raised beds. It could be 10 inches high, for example, taller if you wanted to go taller. And you need some support structures. These are 4x4s that are built in here. They could be 2x4s as well if you want to save a little space. And the green dots are fence poles. Now, pardon me, I was giving this talk to the Wiscasset Garden Club, and I got to this point, and I was talking about that you would have to back a wheelbarrow in to be able to maybe bring compost in or bring the end of season vegetable matter out. And in order to, I guess you could go straight in and walk down here and get to the wheelbarrow, but I was thinking you'd back it in. And I took a look at the garden design, and here's my gate. And I thought, well, you're not getting a wheelbarrow in here when you have a fence here. And so sometimes you learn these things while doing. So we moved the gate to be right here, and this is what it would look like from the front. So you would have your gate and the raised beds in the middle. Now, cost on something like this, and this is basically the end of the talk, and glad to entertain questions, but for a 10 by 16 foot garden with the fencing and raised beds and gate and things that you would need, hinges and latches and soil, and now certainly if you're doing the work, you could subtract $600 or thereabouts, but if you needed to bring somebody in, it paid them $25 an hour. You're pretty close to $2,000, and then you need seeds and/or plants and things like that. And I did not include in this design what you might be putting down in the walkway. It could be some sort of a brick design or pea stone or straw or wood chips or just soil. It all depends on what you'd want to do, and there's so many options on that that would be something that would be extra. So I see there are a few questions here, and how many hours do you and your wife spend in the garden during the summer week? That's a really good question. Before I started at Mary Spring, it was basically my full-time job, and Kathy was working as a nurse, and so when she had time and on weekends, I'm sure it was well over 30 hours a week, 40. Between the two of us, it could have been even more than that. 20 years ago, I also had a computer consulting business, but there were days I was out at 5:30 in the morning and didn't get home from doing farm deliveries until 10 o'clock at night, or even a little earlier maybe. So yeah, 50 hours a week easily, maybe more during planting time. How much square footage do you need to grow enough fruit and vegetables to provide for a family of 2 adults and 2 children for an entire year, including preserving them for non-growing seasons? That's an excellent question, and I'm going to say you're going to need a half an acre, and you're going to grow probably a lot of corn and potatoes and things that store well. Onions store well. You can store carrots and beets in wood shavings. You might, in current times, you certainly can use chest freezers, and things like Mylar bags will make things last longer. But between dry storage or dehydrating, which is a great way to go. For example, Kathy dehydrates kale, chard, and beet greens, and then powders it. And sometimes she mixes them or leaves them separate, and then adds them to stews and soups. And so that's a great way, because if you're saving the dehydrated kale and chard and beet greens as large or intact leaves in a container, it's going to take a lot of space. But if you can then powder it, that would work out much better. You might be canning vegetable soup, for example, and you can use many different recipes to do that. It depends. Less space could be used again for, let's say, a 6-foot kale plant is going to use a lot less space. You wouldn't need as many of them as if you're growing a 2-foot tall kale plant, or maybe one that gets to 30 inches. Pole beans are going to use less space than bush beans that take a longer row. So those are some examples of things, but if you're going to grow a lot of corn and or can it, or grow dry corn like we do, to then grind into flour, that takes a lot of space. You could grow lots of peppers, particularly hot peppers, and dry them. And again, it does take quite a bit of room. Last question. Is there any evidence Native Americans had kitchen gardens? Well, they did a lot of forest burning, and they set large fires, and they burned. It's basically slash and burn agriculture, which has been done in Africa and South America and the jungles. I don't know that they reused the same space, but they might have had native plants that would have been herbs that they would have grown perennially, but over the centuries, the Native Americans, and this, you can go back post-glacier, 10,000 years, they were following the elk migrations. And so they weren't doing agriculture per se. And so they would have been hunters and gatherers, but going, let's say 500, 600 years ago, again, they were burning the forest and then planting in those areas. And evidence, I don't know, but it's quite likely if they had permanent settlements that they would have had perennial herbs, maybe not corn and things like that. Maybe that was done when they were clearing the forest. Could look into that. Well, thank you all very much. I'm very glad you were here, and please go out and enjoy the rest of the day. I know we're going to have a cool morning on Thursday, 37 degrees. So if you have purchased plants that are tender and put them outside, please bring them in. It's a little cold, not a frost, but they will take a few days to recover from a cold temperature. And after that, the weather looks pretty good, and hopefully we can all start to get out in our gardens. So thank you all very much. Remember, this is the last Zoom talk, and we will be in person starting next Tuesday with Greg LeClaire on kitchen gardens. And we hope to see you then. It's going to be free for members and $10 for non-members, and we can take cash and check on that. So thank you all very much, and we will see you next week. Tuesday talks. For more information, please visit maryspring.org. We hope you'll consider supporting Mary Spring. You can donate securely at maryspring.org. Give the office a call at 207-236-2239 or mail your check to Mary Spring Nature Center, P.O. Box 893, Camden, Maine 04843, and make your check payable to Mary Spring Nature Center. Thank you, and we hope to see you again.